Hey guys, thank you for tuning in for our podcast and welcome to episode number 2 of Art Saga Dialogue Season 1. So today we are with our guest architect Shabbir Unwala, where we are discussing about good architecture and bad architecture, and he also shared some tips for young architects. But if you want to watch this in a video format, the link is in the description. You can go and watch it on YouTube and subscribe our channel. So let's go and talk to him.
Architect Shabbir Unwala graduated from Rachna Sansad in 1986. He worked for a couple of firms in Bombay till 1987 but realized that he needed a change of scenery. He then migrated to Lonavala in 1988 and joined Nachiket and Jayoo Patwardhan, where besides doing architecture, he also worked with them on movies as an assistant art director. He was an assistant director on Canadian movie called Bye Bye Blues and Marathi feature film called Limited Manuski. Started his firm Design Workshop in 1989 and since then has been chasing this chimera, where he looks for intersection of subtle art of storytelling with hard logic of structure. He says the journey of last 31 years has been one of an adventure and discovery where he was fortunate to do different building typology from houses to resorts to five-star hotels to school to training centers to Public Promenade, and also develop a completely new typology of buildings on mountain slopes. So starting with your first segment, which is PSD, which means philosophy, story, and design. So the first question in our segment is, what has been your inspiration for architecture?
It's interesting. When I was in my junior college, my cousin came from Lonavala and he was staying with us, and he was into architecture. So I would see him doing models and working out, and I used to meet his friend called Taj, and that's how we started talking about architecture. And that really kicked me, and I said, okay, this is a profession where you can have a lot of fun, and you see people having a lot of fun. So that is my first, a glimpse into an architectural student doing architecture, and that really kicked me. And then in the junior college, we used to have a segment where they used to ask us to read certain books and then write a critical review about the same. So the teacher, she asked me about, one of the books that was asked to read was Ayn Rand's Fountainhead. And that's when I read Ayn Rand's Fountainhead, and you know how inspiring that book is. And you're still young, and your ideas are not formed. You're raw to suggestion. And there it was, one thing, my cousin doing architecture, and the second was Ayn Rand. And that is what started me thinking to go in for architecture as a profession.
That's really nice to hear. Yes, I go for different inspiration, and my inspiration was watching mega structures over Nat Geo.
Wow.
And then I was really inspired with those huge structures, and then that's when I decided I want to go into architecture.
Yeah. So, but you have to remember this. I'm talking 1981.
Yes, sir.
So we used to have black and white TV. We
Correct,
didn't even have a TV. So it's a different generation.
Yes, sir. So my second question to you is your architecture experience as a student and as a professional.
Yeah, student was very interesting, as I said, because I used to be interacting with Masood a lot, and that started. In fact, before joining architecture, I was reading books on architecture. I would read interviews of Louis Kahn and Philip Johnson and Cobbs and FLW. So before I joined, I was quite architecturally aware of different philosophies. And then in third year, it happened that after my exams, I went to America and I was backpacking for 3 months, visiting all the buildings of FLW, Mies van der Rohe. I went to, in Phoenix, I went to see the Paulo Soleri's, the city that he was, what is it called? Forgot the name. Which Paulo Soleri was doing it in off Phoenix. So that was completely a kind of an awakening, you know. I mean, to go and experience architectural masterpieces as a student, it just, you know, it's like, bolte hain na, teesri aankh khul gayi. It was like that. Most of the things you are seeing it in photographs, and photographs don't do justice to architecture. Architecture is something that has to be experienced in real time and not as a photography. And that was something that really got me thinking about architecture on a different level and in a more philosophical way. So that was my, as a student, as an experience which really made a world of difference. And my architecture journey has been continuation of the same, what I learned as a student. So I still consider, we all consider ourselves a student, because architecture as a field is so huge that nobody's a master. You know, I mean, people calling themselves master, I find them quite funny, you know, because you can never be a master of something which is so humongous. And it's almost like life, you know. You can't be a master of life, you can't be master of architecture, because each site has got its own challenges, the client challenges. So you're never at the top of the game. You're always learning something new from each project. So that has been my experience, that I still carry that student inside me, and I approach architecture like that.
So yes, so I have seen the story of you explaining about your backpacking experience when you went to New York, US in third year. That was like really like good thing to do as an architect, and to explore certain projects and to learn from master architects or the big names in architecture. And I think that's a very good stage to learn, and you got a good experience that time. So
yes, absolutely.
So my third question to you is, what is your philosophy for the design?
The philosophy is basically, if you would want to call that, is, you know, you try, each project is, you're trying to be as honest as possible to the program in itself. Then you're being honest to the site, you're being honest to the material, and you're being responsible. That what I try to say is that your act of creation should not be the act of destruction. So how do you, whatever you create, how do you do it in a way that is, you know, which is efficient and which is not hurtful to the Mother Earth. So that's been my kind of it's been my journey, that I try to do that, you know. So that's, if you would want to encapsulate as a philosophy, that's what I would say is my philosophy.
Oh, yes, sir. So I think we'll now start with our next segment, that is segment 2, and we will like to know you better in this segment.
Okay.
So in this segment, we will discuss about your project, which is Eye on the Lake. And we would like to know about the client requirements, the site project challenges, the design process, and the material selection while you were doing this project.
Yeah, it's very, you know, the best thing about Eye on the Lake is when an architect asks you to design something so when you work for an architect, then it's not a client and a professional relationship. It's a very different thing. So Eye on the Lake belongs to Aarti, and she visited the Machan. And after seeing Machan, she said that I want you to do this little pad for me, because that's been kind of an ancestral property for her. And when she was young, she would visit that place. There's a small house over there. And now she had a son, and she said, I want my son to have an experience over there, that we go on a weekend and we spend a weekend. So it was more like a pad for her. And that was a brief. She said, just do what you want to do. And, it's almost like a dream client, that you have a dream site. You're an architect who's your client, and you have complete freedom. And, then the responsibility is so huge, because, most of the time the clients are breathing down your neck. They want this and they want that. And here you have a completely a clean slate and do what you want. And budget is also not a constraint. So it was kind of an ideal thing, And so now, when I went with the site with her, and then we walked around, we said, okay, where do we build it? And then she said, Shabbir, why don't we look at this portion? This is something that I like. And how do you orient the building? Because what you realize is when you are in nature, the most important thing is how do you orient your building? Where do you make it face, and how do you enter your building? And so those things the nuances are so loaded. So then we stood on the site and we said, okay, we look at the deep end of the lake, because I don't know if you visited, but if you visit Eye on the Lake, you'll realize that it is facing the maximum depth of the lake. So the whole building is oriented towards that. So that was the first part. The second part was, you're right on the edge, and then the land drops down, maybe around 30, 35 feet. And that's the lake. So the water just touches I wouldn't call it a foothill, but I would call it kind of a little mound. And the building sits over there. So the whole idea happened that how do you make something which is extremely fragile? Yeah. And I remembered the interview of Australian architect Glenn Murcutt. And in those days, there was no TV, there were no computers, so I would listen it on BBC. And where he talks about architecture, which is fragile, it is not flimsy. There's a difference between flimsy and fragile. A flower is fragile, but it's not flimsy. So, and the whole idea that how do you make this like a bird on that little hillock and just sitting over there ready to fly. So the whole house is like it's just sitting on 2 points, and it's extremely fragile, but it's not flimsy. And the view is everywhere. But now how do you make the main view your focus without losing the side views? So the whole house became like a glass house, But then I gave the slats on the sides. So then you get that as a fragmented view, and your front view is like fully focused. So that's how the design happened. And it was extremely satisfying, not only for yourself, but for the client and the Aarti's son. We made a little mezzanine for him about a bathroom. So it's some small place that he can go and sleep, and it's extremely cozy because it's meant for a kid, And kids, if you give a scale which is so nice, it feels good. Otherwise you feel lost in a huge space. So and the kid just loved it, So that was the most satisfying thing, that what was Aarti's requirement were completely fulfilled.
So how you came up with the name Eye on the Lake or the project?
We were toying around, and honestly, it was Aarti's idea. She's an architect, and so she says, how's Eye on the Lake? I said, fantastic, But then they went over and they made it over water. So it is Eye on the Lake over water. You can...
Okay. This is located in Khadakwasla, right?
This is it, Khadakwasla. Yes.
Okay, sir. So the next question here is, how do you define a good design?
So it reminds me of Louis Kahn's saying that each building should have a bad space to know what good space is. So if you know what is bad architecture, you know what is good architecture. So you should know the bad to know the good, And everybody knows bad architecture. So your definition should be that what is bad architecture. Because if you know bad architecture, you experience bad architecture, immediately you know that good architecture should not have any of the things which is there in the bad architecture.
That's correct.
It's like yin yang, It's like yin yang. Architecture interlocks with bad architecture.
Getting to know about the negative spaces and the positive spaces.
Exactly. Yeah. So, that is what, and we all know, at an intuitive level, not even architects, any human being feels what is good and what is bad.
Correct.
Yeah. So it is, I think it's inherent in us. It's like any animal. You look at the animal kingdom and they make their own houses and they know what a good design is. You look at a anthill and it's mind blowing. It's like a complex structures. I mean, look, and they're so small. And think about where does the intelligence come from? So I think it's inherently given by the creator a sense of good design. And when you do bad architecture, you're actually going against your own nature, because we've been programmed to do good architecture. And when we do bad architecture, we are going against our own grain. Because how do you explain bad architecture? How do you explain bad design? Forget architecture. How do you explain bad design? So I think it is, to understand good architecture, you need to understand bad architecture.
That's correct. So moving on to our next segment. This is a message to young architects. So there are many architects who are starting a new firm today and they are working very hard. So what is your advice for them who are starting a new firm?
Take risk. Don't be in your comfort zone, because if you be in your comfort zone, you will never venture out of it, And the best thing to start your practice is unlearn what you've learned. Because we learn a lot of things that are extremely cliched, which are no-brainers, or ye to aisa hi hota hai. Question everything. Because if you do not have the capacity to question, then you take any answer that you inherited in whatever little experience that you've been exposed as a student and as an architect. So start from the scratch and take risks. Don't be scared. Because if you are scared, in the beginning, you are scared all your life. Because you will never have the power to take risk. And I do not mean risk in terms of structures. When I say take risk in terms of ideas, because from the ideas, your architecture will follow. So please take risk with your own ideas. Challenge your own ideas that you have not challenged it. Challenge each aspect of architecture, and that is the only way to grow as a designer yourself. Because ultimately, why are we doing things is to grow as a human being and to grow as an architect, and to gain knowledge and to spread knowledge. And if you're not taking risk and if you're not challenging yourself, then you will always be in your comfort zone. Then the architecture becomes a formula, like movies, certain movies like, Manmohan Desai's movies, you will know, okay, there will be three brothers, they will be lost in a Mela or Kumbh Mela. One will become Muslim, one will become Christian, one will be Hindu, and you have Amar Akbar Anthony formula for all the movies. And that gets translated. That's so true with architecture, that it becomes part of your It becomes a formula. And that's why a lot of architecture is formula. You see one project of an architect and you know you've seen them all because it's been reduced to a formula. And as a young person starting your own practice, if you do not fall into the trap of making architecture a formula, then you will keep on growing as an architect. And all the time you will be challenging your own ideas. You always will be trying to reinvent each project of yours. So that is my advice to the young architects, that please challenge yourself, challenge your own ideas, unlearn what you've learned, and take risk. Risk not in terms of architecture, but risk in terms of ideas. So that's my honest advice to young people.
So as a young architect myself, I am definitely inspired by things you have told me. And I think definitely everyone who will be watching this video will get inspired from this. So getting back to our last question today, in your opinion, how to keep looking for motivation?
How to look for motivation is, you should be, motivation is something that happens from within. You're self-motivated as a human being, because if somebody is trying to motivate you from outside, it's artificial. So I think motivation, and I think you should read everything, because that motivates you, that opens your mind, that opens the mind to so many ideas. And not just architecture, I read everything under the sun. And there's so much of cross connection that is happening. There's so much of exciting things happening in the world. And once you're aware of it, it challenges you, it motivates you to do things in a way that has never been done before. So I think for motivation, look at good architecture, read great books, and watch movies, good movies.
I think I'll connect with the movies part there. I definitely get motivated by watching movies. When I feel low, I just switch off everything and I just go back to my movies.
Fantastic.
Those are the perfect things to reset your mind and bring you back on track.
Absolutely, Sagar. Absolutely.